LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the April 14th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. This is actually the 6-year anniversary today of the LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup program. I started on April 14th, 2013 with this show. So if you want to check out the original LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, I put a link to it in the live comments. I'll put a link down in the video description for the recorded show viewers. And I'm doing a special 6-year anniversary special for the next 6 days. If you give me a direct PayPal contribution, a link down in the video description, instead of having to pay $10 in a contribution for this ACLU Constitution and this LiberalViewer vinyl weatherproof sticker, you only have to pay $6 for the next 6 days. So if you're watching this video, either now as a live video or anytime between April 20th, you can click on that PayPal link. And as long as you give me a shipping address anywhere in the world, I will send you the Constitution and the hashtag LiberalViewer sticker. So I picked out the weekend's 16 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. The political comedy sources will be both Saturday Night Live from last night and HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, including the Saturday Night Live cold open with Michael Keaton playing Julian Assange. And I will have a few clips at the end talking, because I am a lawyer and have a criminal defense background, I will be talking about whether the indictment against Julian Assange is bogus. That will be the last few clips, but most of my clips will be on my main topic of Trump becoming more lawless, both in the immigration context and maybe as a result of feeling like he's cleared of obstruction of justice. And I'll talk about that also a lot more when I show most of my clips, but that all come from, of course, the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, except CBS's Face the Nation, canceled for golf. Canceled for golf? Is golf really more important than these important national issues? You can let me know what you think down in the comments section, and I'll talk about all that a little more and the lawlessness of the Trump administration after I show the cold open from Saturday Night Live last night, which was all about various people who ended up in prison on MSNBC's lockup. It was kind of a dig at MSNBC right at the beginning of this clip, and then I edited just part of the Julian Assange portrayal by Michael Keaton that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
You're watching MSNBC. Now that the Mueller report turned out to be a big fat zero, we're back to prison show. Right now, it's Lockup, Chino Correctional Facility.
I might still run for president. Avenatti Baldwin, 2020.
Okay, he wins. He's the craziest.
Is he, though?
Now, you sons of bitches, don't hear how crazy I am. Here's how crazy I am. I'm wanted in the U.S. and Sweden. I'm from Australia. I live in London, in Ecuador. You try figuring that one out. Yeah, you cheat your schools and, you rob your companies. That's cute. It is. Yeah. I've attacked the U.S. military, bitches, because I'm an actual James Bond supervillain. And I'm one step away from destroying the goddamn moon. So, you want to get nuts? Come on! Let's get nuts.
Okay, he wins. I yield my time.
Thank you. Is there a bathroom around here? Because I really have to take a WikiLeak.
A WikiLeak bathroom joke. I don't know. Is where the Saturday Night Live writing is going these days? And I don't know. I guess Michael Keaton wasn't really even trying to do a impression of Julian Assange. Although I did do, if you're a follower of mine on Twitter and Facebook, there's a link down in the video description to my facebook.com/liberalviewer page. I posted on Friday a Friday flashback to my 2010 video, WikiLeaks Guilty of Espionage, ? Where I talked a little bit about the possible charges against Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Though, like I said, the last few clips I'm going to show tonight are going to be about whether the indictment against Julian Assange is bogus or not. But the real topic I want to cover is the lawlessness of Donald Trump, maybe because he thinks he's been cleared of obstruction of justice by his attorney general, if not Bob Mueller, in the report that's supposed to come out sometime in the next few days. If you listen to his testimony this last week, he said that the Mueller report was coming out within a week, which would be by like Wednesday, although I've already predicted Friday, April 19th as the best news dump pre-Easter Passover weekend day, but we'll see whether that happens. But one of the ways Trump has become more lawless is in the immigration area, threatening to close down the border, threatening to pardon people who violate the law, and that was covered on Saturday Night Live and HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher a little bit in the two clips I'm going to show you, one of which is about 30 seconds long, the other one's about a minute long. Here's the weekend update clip from Saturday Night Live last night over here about Trump threatening to send undocumented immigrants or maybe even asylum-seeking refugees to sanctuary cities over here.
President Trump is considering releasing detained immigrants into sanctuary cities to send a message to Democrats. What's the message? Have some more voters? Yeah, man, that'll show them. I don't know how they're going to handle a bunch of immigrants in a city like New York. You can't scare us with more immigrants. That just means faster Ubers and more Elmos. Or maybe he should send immigrants to New York. I know a huge building on Fifth Avenue where nobody wants to live anymore.
So that was Michael Che and Colin Jost doing some quick sanctuary city jokes there. I'll have another part of the weekend update program in the last few clips I'm going to show on the Julian Assange indictment and the way he was taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London and how he's possibly going to be extradited to the United States and whether all those charges are bogus or not. But before I get to that, I want to get to my main topic and one more political comedy clip. This is HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. This is a very quick joke. Like I said, there's only about a minute of the Bill Maher monologue. You can watch the entire monologue at a link down in the video description. Both the weekend update and the cold open from Saturday Night Live are also available free on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel at links I put down in the video description. But this is Bill Maher talking about Trump's taxes, which, the Trump administration is totally violating the law by not turning over Trump's tax returns to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. But that was not really well covered by the news analysis shows on the big five corporate outlets, or the four of the five corporate outlets that even had news shows this morning. But Bill Maher covered it in the 1 minute of his monologue that you can see here.
Monday is tax day, or as Trump calls it, Monday. Yes, as we're all paying ours, he will not release his. The IRS was supposed to get his tax returns this Wednesday. Didn't happen. There are committees in Congress that are allowed by law to request any tax returns. The IRS, they have to provide them. This is what we used to call a law. We don't have those anymore. Trump finally has the lackey attorney general he always wanted, William Barr. He testified before Congress this week. He began by thanking the committee for the opportunity to come there and shed more darkness on the situation. This was a bad sign. When he took the oath, he raised his hand. The Sharpie was still in his hand. I don't...
Now, like I said, that is pretty much all the coverage of Trump, the Trump administration, and the IRS, which is supposed to be independent of the president, refusing to turn over Trump's tax returns, even though the law says that they shall, which means legally means they must turn them over. And I will show a Fox News Sunday clip later where Chris Wallace does not really ask Sarah Huckabee Sanders very good questions about that issue a little later. But that's the one thing I liked about that Bill Maher monologue moment, was that he actually covered the lawlessness of the Trump administration on taxes. And he talked a little bit about Bill Barr bringing more darkness to the Mueller report. The Mueller report's supposed to come out in the next few days. That is going to be a big moment that hopefully I'll be able to cover when it happens. And if not, I'll definitely be able to cover next Sunday on my 6-year plus one Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup. But now I want to show you the 4 news summaries. And in this case, Meet the Press, NBC News' Meet the Press, I think that they totally skipped over the lawlessness of the Trump administration. You know, the lawlessness by proposing this sanctuary cities move, which I don't think it's a bad idea, but it's illegal for the president to do it without authorization from Congress. And then this Trump offer to the Custom and Border Patrol that if they violate the law and refuse people the opportunity to apply for asylum, that he'll pardon them. I mean, that's a totally lawless administration. And that basically the sanctuary city idea was briefly mentioned as being lawless somewhere in the middle of this 4-minute NBC News Meet the Press news summary. And then Chuck Todd never mentioned it again. I'll show you his questioning of Kellyanne Conway a little later. Never mentions the lawless actions of the Trump administration, which I'll contrast with a couple of the other news summaries. But here's Chuck Todd, usually a good news summary. There are some good points to this, but I think it really underplays the lawlessness, as I've mentioned many times now, and I will talk about that a little more after we watch this 4 minutes together over here.
Donald Trump was elected. Many people expected or hoped, perhaps, that the presidency would change him. It didn't. Instead, he's changing the presidency. 2 examples this week of Mr. Trump flouting convention illustrate his paradigm-shifting first term. 1, unhappy that his first Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, did not protect him from the Mueller investigation. Mr. Trump fired him and replaced him with Bill Barr, who on Wednesday gave him what Sessions never would: legitimacy to his most controversial talking point on the Russian interference investigation that his campaign had been, quote, spied on. 2, unhappy that the Department of Homeland Security has often resisted his get tough and sometimes illegal border proposals. Mr. Trump sacked DHS's leadership, axing 4 top officials, then said he was considering sending migrants at the border into so-called sanctuary cities, where his immigration policies are most unpopular. What is clear is that Mr. Trump is trying to change the presidency, or at least his presidency, and reshape it in his own image. What is less clear is if he really wants to change the situation at the border or to leverage it for his own political gain.
We're bringing out what's happening with our border.
For President Trump, an asylum crisis on the southern border has become a political opportunity.
I think they're going to pay a very big price in 2020 for all of the things, whether it's the fake witch hunt that they start up or whether it's a situation like this.
In a month dominated by the fight over how much of Robert Mueller's report will be released to the public, the president has leaned in to the border crisis. On Friday, he tweeted, "We are indeed, as reported, giving strong considerations to placing illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities only."
They want more people in their sanctuary cities. Well, we'll give them more people. We can give them a lot. We can give them an unlimited supply and let's see if they're so happy.
The president's threat came just hours after administration officials said the plan was rejected back in February because it was, in the words of one former official, so illegal.
It's just another notion that is unworthy of the presidency of the United States and disrespectful of the challenges that we face as a country, as a people, to address who we are, a nation of immigrants.
The number of apprehensions on the southern border hit a 12-year high in March, dominated by families. Over 53,000 parents and children. Immigration courts now have a backlog of more than 800,000 cases. Each one takes an average of 700 days to process. But instead of addressing the problem,
They have to get rid of the whole asylum system because it doesn't work. And frankly, we should get rid of judges.
this week those attacks got a rare public rebuke from a federal judge.
When politicians attack the courts, it's dangerous, political, and guilty of egregious overreach. You can hear the Klan's lawyers assailing officers of the court across the South.
Last month, the State Department announced it would be ending foreign aid to the 3 Central American countries where most of these migrants come from. And this week, Mr. Trump fired his ICE director and Homeland Security secretary.
Frankly, there's only one person that's running it. You know who that is? It's me.
The firings are just the latest departures from a government the president is molding in his own image.
I'm concerned. I'm concerned of a growing void of leadership within the Department of Homeland Security.
According to the New York Times, last week Mr. Trump urged Kevin McAleenan, now acting Secretary of Homeland Security, to close the border entirely.
Our country's full. We're full.
And on Tuesday, Trump's national security advisors gathered at the White House to discuss whether the military could be used to build tent city detention camps for migrants.
I'm going to have to call up more military. But our military, don't forget, can't act like a military would act. Because if they got a little rough, everybody would go crazy.
And joining me now is Counselor to President Trump, Kellyanne Conway. Ms. Conway, welcome.
And I do have a couple Kellyanne Conway clips, one on the Julian Assange issue, and then one on where Chuck Todd kind of tone polices Trump, but doesn't mention his illegality at all. You notice in that news summary, there was one very brief mention that the move on sanctuary cities, one DHS official said it was so illegal, but that was kind of buried in there. And then when later in the clip, when the Meet the Press news summary mentioned the talking to Kevin McAleenan, the acting head of the Custom and Border Patrol, about closing down the border to asylum seekers, never mentioning that that is even more totally illegal. But that wasn't really covered in the Meet the Press news summary, though there were a lot of other good facts, good numbers about what's happening at the border. I normally give kudos to Chuck Todd for the most extensive, detailed news summary. And it was certainly the longest at 4 minutes. I'm going to compare it to 3 other news summaries from ABC, CNN, and Fox News coming up because, like I said, no CBS Face the Nation this Sunday. ABC actually put a different spin on it, and this is actually might be an important insight into why Trump is acting in this incendiary, lawless manner. One theory, and I was thinking this earlier, is that because he feels exonerated by the Barr report on the Mueller report on obstruction of justice, he feels like he can't violate the law. He can't act in a lawless manner. So maybe he's like unchained now, and he feels he can be more contemptuous of the law than ever. But ABC has a different spin on it. What George Stephanopoulos and the ABC producers are saying on This Week in their news summary is that Trump is failing in his immigration policy. He hasn't gotten his wall, which he promised. He hasn't even cut the number of people who are coming across the border. In fact, they're spiking, as you saw in the numbers from NBC News' Meet the Press. So he's like saying all these incendiary things to kind of distract people from the fact that his immigration policy is a failure. And that's kind of, I don't know, maybe that is a more accurate analysis than the the whole idea that he's now unchained and unleashed, why he's acting this way. You can let me know which theory you think is more accurate after we watch that 1 minute, 17-second ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary from this morning over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. It was the defining issue of his first White House run. But as the president gears up for 2020, his promise to secure America's southern border is a promise unfulfilled. No wall paid for by Mexico. No stemming the flow of migrants to our borders. The numbers are growing by the month, overwhelming the system. And the president is responding to this political and humanitarian crisis with increasingly incendiary rhetoric and policies. Threatening to close the border before backing off, cleaning house at Homeland Security, and Friday, contradicting his own White House by confirming his desire to bus migrants to sanctuary cities run by Democrats.
California certainly is always saying, oh, we want more people, and they want more people in their sanctuary cities. Well, we'll give them more people, and let's see if they're so happy. They say we have open arms. They're always saying they have open arms. Let's see if they have open arms.
Only hours before, White House officials said the idea had been rejected. Immigration experts noted it was impractical, costly, possibly illegal. Democrats called it callous and cynical politics. But as we come on the air this morning, the president defiant, his staff refining the proposal. And that's where we begin with White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. Sarah, thank you for joining us again. So where does this idea stand right now?
And I'll have multiple Sarah Huckabee Sanders clips, one from ABC's This Week and a few from Fox News Sunday. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was on 2 shows. Kellyanne Conway was supposed to be on 2 shows. She was on Meet the Press, and she was supposed to be on Face the Nation, but then that was canceled for golf, as I've mentioned multiple times. But I kind of like that framing from ABC. You can let me know what you think. I think that they were also appropriately talking about the illegality of Trump's actions. The next news summary is almost exactly the same length from CNN State of the Union, where, by the way, I'm looking here at my clip list. If you want to follow along with my clip list, there's a link down in the video description to my 16 clips and one still photo I'm going to show you. Right now we are on clip number 6 from CNN State of the Union, where this Jake Tapper always says, what's the State of the Union this week? Well, it's trying to keep up. And he talks about waiting for the Mueller report to come out and the Trump being out of control on immigration, and also talking about the pardon and the sanctuary city controversies and some of the numbers from the border on immigration. That, I don't know, it's kind of similar to the ABC News Summary, which I'll talk about a little more with you after we watch Jake Tapper from CNN State of the Union this morning over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is trying to keep up. Washington is preparing for the expected release of the full Mueller report in just days after a week in which President Trump seemed to spiral out of control a bit on his signature issue, immigration. The president spent Saturday railing on Twitter, saying he's, quote, not frustrated, unquote, except it sure seems like he is frustrated. The president began the week by removing the top leadership of the Department of Homeland Security, ousting Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, along with other top leaders of ICE, the Secret Service, and more on their way out the door as well. Then, after the White House denied that the president wanted to release undocumented immigrants into sanctuary cities, President Trump on Twitter confirmed he was considering such a move. This, as senior administration officials tell me that the president told border agents to stop letting asylum seekers into the U.S., contrary to U.S. law. And then he told the head of Customs and Border Protection he'd give him a pardon if he went to jail for carrying out the president's order. The president is now denying this, but his apparent anxiety on the issue is driven by real numbers. In March, 92,000 migrants were apprehended at the border. That's the highest number in over a decade. Joining me now is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jerry.
And I will have a Jerry Nadler clip coming up. But I don't know. Do you think that news summary was better than the ABC one? I think they're pretty close. both better than the much longer NBC News Meet the Press news summary because of its downplaying of the lawlessness of the Trump administration that I've talked about multiple times now. But probably the worst news summary comes from, as you might expect, Fox News and Fox News Sunday, where Chris Wallace talked about some of the issues and put it over to Kevin Corke, but you won't hear a lot about the lawlessness of the Trump administration here. And this is clip number 7. You'll see one of the things that I really hate in Kevin Corke's news summary after the introduction from Chris Wallace is he totally mischaracterizes what a sanctuary city is. A sanctuary city is a city or a sanctuary state like California, where I live. It doesn't mean that undocumented immigrants in the city or state can't be arrested or can't be detained by ICE, that ICE agents aren't allowed in those places. That's not what it means at all. It just means that local law enforcement, like the police and the sheriff, don't cooperate with ICE. And that's really important because you want the immigrant communities, including undocumented immigrants, to feel safe talking to local law enforcement, police and sheriff, when they're victims of crimes or witnesses to crimes, because that makes us all safer. And local law enforcement doesn't have to cooperate with federal immigration authorities for reasons I'll talk about more after I show the last clip in this topic where Senator Rick Scott of Florida totally mischaracterizes the legality of sanctuary cities. But here is Kevin Corke on Fox News Sunday mischaracterizing the meaning of sanctuary cities, claiming that undocumented immigrants can't be detained and deported by ICE in those places, which is totally wrong, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch that final news summary from Chris Wallace and Kevin Corke on Fox News Sunday this morning over here.
Again from Fox News in Washington. When the story first broke this week that President Trump looked at a plan to ship detained immigrants to sanctuary cities, the White House said it was an idea that had been floated and rejected. But now the president says he's seriously considering it as part of his ongoing battle with Democrats over border security. All this as Washington braces for the release of the Mueller report. In a moment, we'll speak with White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. But first, Kevin Corke is tracking the latest developments from the White House. Kevin.
Chris, sanctuary cities are supposed to offer, at least in theory, a protective buffer zone for those in this country illegally to prevent them from being deported or arrested by federal authorities. But to hear officials at the White House tell it, they may also be the ideal place to send thousands of migrants who are already here as they await for their asylum cases to be heard.
We're working with DHS, we're working with ICE to try and make sure that happens because, after all, it's what they want. They should not say this is retribution politically. They should say this is an olive branch.
Shortly after that, by White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley, the president tweeted the USA has the absolute legal right to have apprehended illegal immigrants transferred to sanctuary cities. From City Hall to the halls of Congress to the 2020 campaign trail, Democrats have long argued that the humanitarian crisis at the border demands a nuanced, humane approach, calling the latest White House gambit cynical and accusing the president of using migrants as pawns in a heated political battle.
What the president is doing is, in my view, terribly wrong. What we do need to do is sit down and have comprehensive immigration reform.
All this in a week that saw leaders from the Capitol to the White House carefully monitoring the Justice Department, which is expected to release a redacted version of the Mueller report's findings soon.
Certainly, we're all looking for that. By the way, Chris, the president also won a rare victory from the typically left-leaning Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in California. On Friday, the court stayed a lower court ruling effectively allowing the administration to send Central American asylum seekers back to Mexico to wait while their asylum cases can be heard here. Chris?
Kevin Corke reporting from the White House.
The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals isn't really that liberal-leaning. And some people say it's the most overturned court, which is also not true. I think maybe the Fifth Circuit is more overturned than the Ninth Circuit, but that stay of the whole asylum thing, that just kept things the way they are from Friday until next Tuesday. So I don't know why they're so excited about that. You'll hear, I think, in a later clip, Kellyanne Conway, or was it Sarah Huckabee Sanders mentioning that. Like I said, they're both out on the Sunday shows. I pretty much explained why that clip was a really poor summary of what's going on in the Trump administration. They did not really mention the lawlessness at all. You saw Chris Wallace at the beginning there talk about how this sanctuary city move was considered and rejected, not because it was so illegal, which even NBC News' Meet the Press mentioned in their news summary. And as I said before, I showed that clip, Kevin Corke totally mischaracterized what happens in a sanctuary city, and I'll talk about that more when I show the Rick Scott clip, clip number 12 on my clip list here, but now I'm coming up to the clip number 8, which is one of a couple questionings of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the White House press secretary, by Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, where I don't think he did a really good job of showing that he's a straight news journalist. He's a supposedly straight news journalist, because in this first questioning here of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, he talks about how Trump asked members of Customs and Border Protection to close the border, and that he offered pardons, which would be, I don't know, is that obstruction of justice? Is that a conspiracy? I think it is some kind of obstruction of justice or abuse of authority for the president to offer pardons to people to break the laws of the United States. But Chris Wallace does not really talk about that with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Instead, he says, what did he really say? And I think it's pretty softball questioning, which I will discuss a little more after you watch that 2-minute plus clip together over here.
The New York Times reports that last week the president told acting DHS chief Kevin McAleenan that he urged him to close the border to migrants and offered to pardon him if necessary. Now, the White House says that's not the way it went down. What did the president say to McAleenan?
Look, the president has addressed this. DHS has put out a statement on this topic saying that that is inaccurate reflection. The president is a person and a president of law and order. That's his entire focus since coming in, is actually restoring law and order to this country and trying to put in real process in place when it comes to the immigration system.
What did he say?
Look, the president has asked them to do everything they can and everything they're allowed to do under the law to stop the massive crisis we have at our southern border. It's the same thing he says publicly day in and day out, and it's the same thing he says behind closed doors to staff, is figure out how we stop this crisis, how we fix this problem. Let's look for every possible option to do so, and that's what our team has been doing. But it would be really nice and much simpler if Congress would spend 15 minutes and sit down with the president and let's just come up with the best solutions so that we don't have to do this. We don't have to look for all of these different options. It seems so basic, and yet Congress refuses to want to spend all of its time attacking the president, investigating the president on these taxpayer-funded fishing expeditions that are completely outrageous and completely baseless instead of doing their jobs.
All right, let me ask you a little bit about that, and I promise you we're going to ask Democratic Senator Cardin in the next segment about the Democratic plan for immigration. Attorney General...
They don't have one. Their only plan is to fight the president, and it's a sad day in America when the Mexican government is willing to do more for the United States illegal immigration problem than Democrats in Congress. And I hope that you will ask them, and I hope you'll ask what their solution is and why they're so unwilling to address it.
Let's get finished with this segment so I can get on to the next.
So, like I said, softball questioning, letting Sarah Huckabee Sanders get away with saying the Trump administration is the one for comprehensive immigration reform and Republicans are for comprehensive immigration reform, even though there were many deals that Trump could have made, that that's the thing, he's like all over the place on the issues, and you can't even make a deal with him because the Democrats thought they had a deal with him at one point, giving like $25 billion for border security in exchange for a legislative fix for the Dreamers and all sorts of... I mean, the Democrats have been willing to deal on comprehensive immigration reform all the way back into the Obama administration, so that was also disingenuous. In addition to, you saw Chris Wallace never really asked about the illegality of a president offering pardons to an official in his administration in exchange for breaking the asylum laws. That's a scandal, and of course totally brushed over by Chris Wallace on Fox News. And then there's another clip that even bolsters that Fox News bias case here, where you'll see Chris Wallace asks Sarah Huckabee Sanders about the attempt from the Congress to get Trump's tax returns. Remember, I showed that Bill Maher clip where he was really the only one of my regular sources of clips to mention that it was totally illegal for the Trump administration to refuse to give their tax returns, because there's a law that says when the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee asks for any filer's tax returns, the IRS shall give that tax return. You heard that in the Bill Maher clip. You won't hear that at all from Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. He's just trying to find out if the Trump administration is going to comply, but he never mentions that the Trump administration is being lawless, violating actual federal law. You'll even see he shows a clip of Trump saying there is no law without ever fixing that error of fact. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch another example of softball questioning on Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace softball questioning Sarah Huckabee Sanders about the tax situation, which I'll discuss a little more with you after we watch it together over here.
Blown through all kinds of lightning round rules. I'm not sure you'll be invited back for lightning rounds after
You're not
that.
asking yeses or no's.
I know that.
I know that. Yes or no's.
All right, well, I'll try better this time. House Democrats have now given the IRS 9 more days to turn over 6 years of Trump tax returns. Here's what the president said about that this week.
While I'm under audit, I would not give my taxes. There's no law whatsoever.
Will the president demand that the IRS not turn over his tax returns, or will he live? This is, I think, pretty close to yes or no. Or will he live with whatever the IRS decides?
The president's been clear from the beginning, as long as his taxes are under audit, he's not going to release them. He's also filled out hundreds of pages in financial disclosure.
I know, but will he tell the IRS not to?
But hold on, Chris, this isn't...
Will he tell the IRS not to release them, though?
We'll have to see what happens on that front. But the president's been clear. This issue's even been litigated. We went through it in 2016. But one of the biggest things that I think people aren't seeing is the fact that the only reason that the Oversight Committee has the ability to request someone's taxes, or for the purpose of determining policy, this has nothing to do with whether or not they're going to determine policy. This is all about political partisanship. This is a dangerous, dangerous road. And frankly, Chris, I don't think Congress, particularly not this group of congressmen and women, are smart enough to look through the thousands of pages that I would assume that President Trump's taxes will be. My guess is most of them don't do their own taxes, and I certainly don't trust them to look through the decades of success that the president has and determine anything. He's filled out hundreds of pages in a financial disclosure form, and I think it is a disgusting overreach that they are making when they're not doing this based on policy, and it puts every American who's filled out tax reform or tax forms in the past.
This is a yes or no question. Have you filed your
everybody?
Have you filed your taxes yet?
I'm almost finished. I'm in the process. I've got
So that was Chris Wallace's follow-up question. Have you filed your taxes yet? When what Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the White House press secretary, just said there is, well, the Democrats aren't smart enough to understand Trump's taxes. Did you hear that? The Democrats are not smart enough to understand Trump's taxes because, of course, Trump is a tax genius and the Democrats are idiots, I guess. I don't know. That was actually from some of the reaction to the Sunday morning news analysis shows I've seen on Facebook and Twitter, that Sarah Huckabee Sanders' comment that the Democrats aren't smart enough to understand Trump's taxes. That's one of the ones that's getting a lot of social media play, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And this next clip is one I talked about earlier. It's Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press talking to Kellyanne Conway about Trump's actions, but like I said, he never really mentions the illegality. He's really doing more of like tone policing here, saying that, you know, his tone is too harsh. He's not really reaching out to Democrats. What he's doing wouldn't really, he uses the word coerce in a way that doesn't really make sense. He's not coercing the response. I think he means persuade instead of coerce. But I think this is really poorly thought out questioning of Kellyanne Conway on what Trump is doing, not looking at the illegality and focusing, like I said, way too much on the tone, which I'll just, and the other thing I'll discuss more with you after we watch this clip together is Kellyanne Conway is all like loaded up to talk about Ilhan Omar, the Muslim Democrat from Minnesota who's been in the news so much and who Trump really attacked on Twitter. And you'll see that comes up twice in this clip where Chuck Todd is talking nothing about that, but she just really, really wants to talk about Ilhan Omar, obviously, as I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch that almost 4-minute clip that does not really look really good for the questioning of Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press this morning, as I'll talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
In the House.
How is the president playing a constructive role here? Here's David French in the National Review earlier this week. And this has to do with sort of the way now his critics respond to him. You talked about the tweets. They're not alarmed by his bluster, they're amused. They mock him. His threats and tweets fuel the opposition and undermine his ability to make the deals he needs to make. He's testing the political utility of the opposite of Teddy Roosevelt's admonition. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Tweeting loudly and often carrying no real stick at all. Let's look at what the last 4 months have given us. He shut down the government, national emergency, I'll shut the border, I'm sending these migrants to sanctuary cities. What part of that is the same tone that you have had, which says, we want to sit down, we want to have more judges, we want to try to solve this? The president doesn't sound like somebody who wants to solve the crisis.
Well, for him, it's all of the above. It's everything you've just said. And he has asked for Congress in a 70-point plan to do everything from end the visa lottery system to chain migration. He was willing to do a deal on the Dreamers. It's false when everybody says, oh, there was $25 billion on the table by the Democrats, but the president walked away. That was what was allocated, not appropriated, and they know it. But in addition to that, the president has looked at many different options. Administratively, from the executive branch of the government, we've done a great deal of work. We need the legislature to step in, and we need the courts to do something like the Ninth Circuit did just on Friday, Chuck, which is at least give us some latitude on this remain in Mexico policy. So many of the liberals want the illegal migrants to remain in America. Why not remain in Mexico while your claims of asylum are being processed? This is something that our secretaries, our cabinet, and the president brokered with Mexico. It's safe passage for those those families and unaccompanied minors to remain in Mexico while their claims of asylum are being processed. But I think that, look, I think the rough rhetoric this week, respectfully, came from the other side. You have this anti-Semitic congresswoman who's been rebuked by members of her own party, now saying something happened to someone.
No. I know what you're trying to do here. I want to go back. Why the president is trying to browbeat Democrats. The president's trying to browbeat them to come over. That's no way to get a compromise. Even Mitch McConnell is saying, enough of this already.
Well, why don't
and
they
the
come
president
to
keep...
We'll meet them this afternoon if they'd like to come to the White House.
Why don't you invite them?
Talk about their invite. The offer stands. The invitation is open. They were there several times, the leadership, as you know, to avert a government shutdown and then during it, all on this issue.
But it's always his way or the highway. He never is sitting here saying...
I disagree.
What part of shutting down the government? I'll do this. That's not how anybody would be coerced to saying, yeah, let's sit down and see if we can come and reach common ground.
They're willing. They are welcome to come, and I will tell you, the Problem Solvers Caucus did come. There's a great deal of frustration among some of the rank-and-file members who represent more moderate districts and, frankly, who represent districts that Donald Trump won in 2016, for example. They're very frustrated. They've been to the White House. They talk to people like me quietly, saying that they wish that the radical freshmen who get all the magazine covers and all the ink and airtime, I guess they're very upset with the leadership today, though, because overnight or yesterday, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib tweeted that she's so tired of being used to show that the party's diverse and that they can't get a seat at the table, can't get their policy issues forward, something that was retweeted by Congressman Ilhan Omar. So I think there's trouble in Pelosi paradise, but if she wants to fix immigration, she can come.
You keep trying to insert other...
TVPRA,
you keep trying to do these
asylum,
things. I want to go back to how the president is perhaps making this situation worse.
Flores.
Here is the New York Times from Wednesday. Perversely, the president's own anti-immigrant rhetoric has helped supercharge the pipeline of migrants from Honduras.
So you can see Chuck Todd there, no follow-up on the illegality. He did a okay job of tone policing, or of pointing out that she was trying to distract with the allusions to Ilhan Omar, and there was even a Rashida Tlaib in there, but I don't know why Chuck Todd was so much more concerned with tone policing than the illegality of what happened with the sanctuary cities, with the closing down the border. That, like I said, that was totally underplayed on Meet the Press. That is an issue that Jake Tapper brings up with Jerry Nadler, however, on CNN's State of the Union here, where Jake Tapper actually specifically asked Jerry Nadler whether this pardon offer is something that's obstruction of justice that the House Judiciary Committee should look into, and I will talk about that a little more after we watch that 90-second clip from CNN's State of the Union together over here.
According to senior administration officials, President Trump told border agents to stop letting migrants, including asylum seekers, into the U.S. contrary to U.S. law. And then he told Kevin McAleenan, the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection at the time, that he'd pardon him if he went to jail for doing so. Now, I don't know if the president was serious or joking about the pardon remark, and he's since denied it, but those are the facts as relayed to me by senior administration officials. Your response?
Well, my response is that this just shows the president's contempt for law, another instance of the president's contempt for law, to order that something clearly illegal, namely blocking people claiming asylum from coming into the country, which is clearly against our law, that be done is against the law, or offering a pardon, even if in jest, to someone who would disobey the law at the president's request. This is exactly contrary to the key presidential duty and to his oath, which is to see that the laws are faithfully executed. That's the main job of the president, to see that the laws are faithfully executed. And for a president to sabotage that goal by deliberately seeking to break the law is unforgivable.
Is this something that you think your committee will take a look at, or does your commentary on it end here on the show?
Well, it's part of a pattern of conduct that we certainly have to take a look at after we see the Mueller report.
President Trump has been pushing the Department of Homeland Security to transport
So, like I said before I showed that clip, I think Jake Tapper did a better job of highlighting the illegality as to whether this pardon offers obstruction of justice. Jerry Nadler's waiting for the Mueller report, and that's supposedly coming up sometime in the next few days. But I don't think Jake Tapper did anywhere near as good a job talking to Florida Senator Rick Scott in this next clip, where he also talks about illegality, but he lets Rick Scott get away with saying that sanctuary cities are also failing to follow the law, and that is totally not true based on the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, if you have your U.S. Constitution handy, and I'll discuss that a little more after we watch this almost 3-minute clip of Jake Tapper asking some good questions of Florida Senator Rick Scott, but not following up on the sanctuary city issue at all, as I'll discuss after we watch that clip together over here.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. President Trump is brushing off reports that he's upset by the situation at the border and his administration's response to it, but all evidence points to the contrary, and the president does not seem overly concerned that his plans to stem the tide of illegal immigration might not be entirely legal. Join me now, Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida. He sits on the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Senator Scott, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. President Trump tweeted last night he has the, quote, absolute legal right to transport undocumented immigrants to sanctuary cities. It's a plan he's considering in order to retaliate against Democrats. I obtained some guidance from the general counsel at DHS suggesting to the White House that he didn't think this plan would pass legal muster. Do you have any legal concerns about transporting migrants to sanctuary cities?
Jake, I don't know whether it's legal or illegal. I mean, maybe he's just saying this to make everybody crazy, make everybody talk about it on their shows. But what I do know is I've been up there. I've been in the Senate for 90 days. We're not securing our border. You know, we're not enforcing our laws. You know, sanctuary cities are illegal. You heard Congressman Nadler say contempt for the law. That's clearly contempt for the law. You don't get to pick and choose what laws you do and what laws you comply with. You and I don't get to. Cities don't get to. What I don't get is why don't we try to solve the problem? We don't want illegal immigration. We don't want people coming illegal across our border. We want legal immigration. I'm from a state that we love immigrants, but we want legal immigration. So it's frustrating to me we're not getting anything done.
Senior administration officials told me on Friday that the president told border agents to block asylum seekers from entering the U.S. when he visited Calexico, California, about a week and a half ago. And then he told Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin McAleenan, now the acting department secretary for DHS, that if he went to jail for closing the border at Calexico, the president would give him a pardon. Now, I know President Trump's unhappy with U.S. immigration laws, but what's your response to this? Do you think that his frustration gives him the right to tell subordinates to break the law?
No. I've finished 8 years as governor. What I told everybody, we're going to enforce all the laws, whether we like them or not. If you want to change the law, you have to go to the legislature. In this case, it would be Congress. So I'm sure the president's very frustrated because, we're not securing our border. The Democrats are stopping this. But we have to comply with every law. Everybody does, including sanctuary. There's no such thing as a sanctuary city. You don't have a right to pick and choose the law. I don't get to say, oh, Florida, we don't pay federal income taxes. You don't get to do those things. So let's all comply with the law. Let's fix immigration.
President Trump's replacing several senior leaders in the Department of Homeland Security, including...
So you saw there, Jake Tapper did a good job of talking about the illegality of some of the policy proposals from the Trump administration, but he let Rick Scott from Florida get away with a couple times claiming that sanctuary cities were also violating the law, and that is not accurate. If you have your Constitution, here's my ACLU Constitution, read your 10th Amendment, and it says that powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Now, under the 10th Amendment, that means that local law enforcement, sheriffs, police, state law enforcement authorities, they cannot be commandeered by the federal government to participate in civil enforcement of some sort of civil enforcement administration. And that's the thing. Immigration law is civil law. If the federal authorities think someone is actually guilty of a crime, they can get a warrant from a judge, and local law enforcement, they'll have to obey that. But if they just think someone is violating a civil law by being an undocumented immigrant, they can't force state and local authorities to enforce those laws. In fact, the Supreme Court case Prince versus the United States that held that, that's an opinion by Antonin Scalia, and it was about whether the federal authorities can make state and local officials enforce gun control laws. So that's some weird conservative backlash for you, and I talk about that a lot more in several videos on this playlist. My Feds cannot require local officials to enforce immigration law videos. I have 4 of them there, and I have a link down in the video description to that playlist if you want to know more about that legal analysis that Jake Tapper did not do at all in his questioning of Florida Senator Rick Scott. And I have one more clip on this Trump lawlessness subject before I get to my few Julian Assange clips. This is Sarah Huckabee Sanders talking to George Stephanopoulos. In this clip, I think you're going to see not just spin from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I think here you're going to see a bald-faced lie, because George Stephanopoulos, to his credit, is putting the credibility of the New York Times and New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman up against the credibility of President Donald Trump, and he doesn't really have a lot of credibility. And you'll see Sarah Huckabee Sanders here actually decides to side with Donald Trump over the New York Times, but and it's over the issue of whether the New York Times checked with the White House press office before they published this story. Trump says no, they didn't. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she says, well, I'm not sure what story they're talking about, even though, of course, remember, she is the White House press secretary. She knows the answer to this question. She is basically lying right to your face and lying to George Stephanopoulos in the 3-minute clip that I'll talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
CNN are also reporting that on his trip to the border last week, the president, Trump, urged Kevin McCallum, now the acting Secretary of Homeland Security, to close the border, and that he told border agents there not to let migrants in. According to CNN, the agents were told by their leaders that they had to follow the law and they'd be personally liable if they did what the president said. Homeland Security officials were pretty alarmed by what they heard down there at the border last week.
Homeland Security pushed back on this, as has the president. They both pushed back Secretary Nielsen as well as the president. Look, George, I don't know about you, but CNN isn't usually my first stop for a good source, particularly not when it comes to this president. The president is actually the president trying to enforce laws, not go around them. We're a country of laws, and we have a president who supports that and is not asking anybody to do anything outside of those bounds. In fact, he's asking Congress to step up and give greater legal standing so that they can do more to stop this crisis. No one's trying to skirt the law, and certainly not being encouraged by the president to do so.
You took on CNN there. The president also took on the New York Times last night in a tweet about this story, and he said that they never even called to check for the truth. But the reporter Maggie Haberman says they actually sent emails to the White House press office, 3 emails that were acknowledged, and they were simply refused to comment. So who's telling the truth there, the president or Maggie Haberman?
Look, the New York Times regularly steps out of bounds. Even when we respond and tell them something's not true, they still run with the story. I'm not sure the particular story that's in question on this front. But again, I'm going to take the word of the president versus CNN or the New York Times any day of the week.
But the Times did call and check, correct?
Again, I'm not sure about this particular story. I'd have to look back to see what story they're talking about. We do talk to them regularly, and a lot of times we push back on a story, and that's simply not enough for them. They like to run with anonymous sources on the regular basis about this president. It's an unprecedented amount of negative coverage that not only them, but a number of other outlets spend. Over 90% of the coverage about this president is negative, despite the fact that our country is doing extremely well. Our economy is booming. ISIS has been defeated in Syria. We've gotten rid of countless regulations that have allowed our economy to grow, that have allowed more jobs to pour in, that have made us an energy-dominant country again. The country is doing extremely well, yet if you looked at the media and the coverage, you would think that the whole place was falling apart. I think that is a real problem, and certainly something the president's going to continue to call out.
I think every president feels they get subject to unfair coverage every once in a while. The question is whether or not that was accurate.
You would know, George. You've certainly been there yourself.
Absolutely.
Sitting in this
question,
position.
but the question, yeah, but that's the question, though, is that who's telling the truth about whether or not they were contacted. But I do want to move on right now. The president has also been sending out those tweets this week about Congress.
So, like I said before I showed that clip, I think George Stephanopoulos did a pretty good job of showing that Sarah Huckabee Sanders was lying pretty much straight out, since she is the White House press secretary. She knows whether the New York Times asked for comment before they ran their story. She knows which story that tweet is about. She knows Donald Trump is lying, and the New York Times did check before they ran the story. So if you disagree, you can tell me down in the comment section. I think George Stephanopoulos did a good job talking about the legality also earlier. But anyway, that is the last clip on the unlawful Trump administration, the lawless Trump administration, the main topic. But I did promise a few clips here at the end on whether the Julian Assange indictment is bogus. Back in 2010, I talked about why I thought Julian Assange should not be guilty of espionage, and I've been really disappointed seeing how Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN have all covered this as if, the Trump administration, they didn't charge him with publishing confidential material from Chelsea Manning, but they charged him with hacking, conspiring to hack. But that's not really what happened. And I'll talk about that more after I show you what happened to Julian Assange this week, where he was taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And the Ecuadorian embassy, they put out a lot of cute cat pictures and talked about what a bad house guest he was. And I think that might have been a cover story for, they actually violated the laws of asylum. They gave him asylum and then kicked him out, which that wasn't right. And anyway, if you want to see what happened, you remember the Julian Assange impression from Michael Keaton with the long, he looked like some sort of crazed Santa character. Well, you'll see that again in the Saturday Night Live clip from Weekend Update, which both remind you of what happened in Ecuador and then kind of makes fun of Julian Assange again. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
WikiLeaks founder and reason I put tape over my computer camera, Julian Assange, was arrested at the Ecuadorian assembly in the embassy in London, and this dude did not go quietly. That is not how you're typically removed from an embassy. That's how you're removed from the F train. But it was so satisfying to see an internet troll get dragged out into the sunlight. You can be Lord of Darkness on the internet, but when 7 cops have you pinned to the sidewalk, you can't be like, I summon the power of emails. Then when asked about Assange's arrest, President Trump said this.
I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. I know there is something having to do with Julian Assange. I know nothing really about him. It's not my deal in life.
What is your deal in life? I'm just genuinely curious since you brought it up. Also, you cannot say that WikiLeaks is not your deal, because at some point it was like your whole deal.
This WikiLeaks is unbelievable. Boy, I love reading those WikiLeaks. This WikiLeaks is fascinating.
It's been amazing what's coming out on WikiLeaks.
I love WikiLeaks.
You're more obsessed with WikiLeaks than this audience is with BTS.
And whatever, I don't know how great those jokes were. They just wanted to get, that was like pandering to the audience who were there to see this BTS band, which I had never seen until I watched Saturday Night Live last night. But they did at least give you a better news summary of what happened to Julian Assange than you saw on any of those other Big Five or Big Four corporate outlet news summaries. So at least Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live gets that straight news, gets those straight news kudos for that coverage. But the one thing, like I said earlier, that I wanted to criticize all the corporate news media for is overplaying what Julian Assange is charged with. And I have two clips, one from Fox News Sunday and one from NBC News' Meet the Press. First, here on Fox News Sunday, you have Chris Wallace questioning Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and it's on this thing where during the 2016 campaign, just like you saw on Saturday Night Live, Trump said, you know, he loved WikiLeaks because they hurt Hillary Clinton, but the one thing that Chris Wallace says in his questioning of Sarah Huckabee Sanders that isn't quite true is he says that Julian Assange is guilty of a conspiracy to hack. And I'll discuss that a little more after we watch this Fox News Sunday clip. Chris Wallace, Sarah Huckabee Sanders together over here.
Lightning round, because I got three more questions I want to ask you. Quick questions, quick answers. The Justice Department has now charged...
I'll do my best.
I'll do my best, too. The Justice Department has now charged Julian Assange with conspiracy to hack into Defense Department computers. Here's what the president said about WikiLeaks during the campaign and then this week.
WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks. This WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove. Boy, I love reading those WikiLeaks.
I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing.
How can the president say he knows nothing about WikiLeaks? Remember, lightning round. And does he regard Julian Assange as a villain or a hero?
Look, clearly the president was making a joke during the 2016 campaign. Certainly we take this serious. In fact, our administration is the only one that's done anything about it. Let's not forget that the reason Julian Assange is being looked at is because of the engagement he had with Chelsea Manning. That individual is the person that the Obama administration actually commuted their sentence. We're the only ones that have taken this whole process seriously and actually doing something to solve the problem.
Okay.
The president was making a joke during the campaign. It was talking about the specifics of the case at that moment.
It was a joke he made over and over again, but in any case.
So Chris Wallace did cross-examine a little about how Trump loved WikiLeaks during the campaign, but never heard of WikiLeaks now. But he did say that Assange was charged with a conspiracy to hack. But if you read the actual indictment, and I have looked at the indictment, what Julian Assange is charged with is talking to Chelsea Manning about how he might log into the Defense Department computer that he already had access to in a way that wouldn't divulge his identity. He wanted to basically log in as someone else. And so he showed Assange the administrative file with the encrypted passwords of other people, but they never actually, Chelsea Manning never actually logged in as someone else, so it was like an abstract conversation that didn't come to fruition, and it wasn't to hack into the computer. Chelsea Manning already had access. It might technically fall under the law, the computer fraud and whatever act, I'm missing one of the words, but because you violate that act if you exceed your authority, not just have no authority, but exceed your authority. But that's very technical. It's not really hacking into the Defense Department computers. It's something that journalists really do all the time, in that they help their sources avoid detection. It's not really like helping your source break in. It's more like, I don't know, giving him gloves so that he doesn't leave fingerprints. I don't know. It's definitely an overplay. And one thing that Chris Wallace let Sarah Huckabee Sanders get away with was mentioning the Obama administration. This isn't new information that Chelsea Manning talked to Julian Assange about this, about a different, using a password from a different account to get into the computers. That came out years and years ago in Chelsea Manning's trial. If you follow Glenn Greenwald on Twitter, you'll see that Glenn Greenwald has been pointing all of this out. And so the Obama administration decided not to prosecute Julian Assange on this very issue. And so helping a source avoid detection, that's something journalists do. The other thing Julian Assange is charged with is saying, well, can you get more documents for me? That's something journalists also do. And so this really might be about charging Julian Assange with, under the Espionage Act, in an unprecedented way for publishing material that someone else, classified material that someone else took and then leaked. And you'll see Kellyanne Conway seems to be intimating that might be happening in the final news clip before my bonus Dash and Sandy clip, of course, where Chuck Todd is really only asking about whether Trump had advanced knowledge, and then Kellyanne Conway sort of gives away the idea that maybe it's publishing confidential information that should be punished, or at least shamed, in the final clip that I'll talk about with you after we watch together over here.
Of what was going to happen to Julian Assange?
Not to my knowledge. I certainly wasn't.
So he did not know in advance
what
was going to happen. The federal government, whatever deal was made with the UK and any of that stuff was from the State Department?
I'm sorry, I don't know, because that's the State Department, the Department of Justice.
But you don't believe the president was briefed in advance?
I don't know, and I don't think so. And I just want to say one more thing, and having discussed this with him after the fact several times, the president believes that those who publish classified information should not do that. In other words, that goes for major publications.
So he thinks he should criminalize it? He should criminalize?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, remember, Julian Assange is not being indicted because he was a journalist. He's being indicted because he hacked. Same thing with Private Manning. And so anybody who's publishing classified information, in our view, should think thrice before they do that, because you can imperil folks. It's also why, I think it's part of why some of the redactions will come out in the Mueller report. You're protecting sources and methods. You're protecting grand jury information. You're protecting third parties who haven't been indicted and certainly won't be impeached. I know they want to embarrass and harass the president where they couldn't impeach and indict him, and we'll see what happens with that.
I'm going to have to leave it there, Kelly.
Thank you for having me, Chuck.
It's nice to have you. Nice.
So there you have it. Kellyanne Conway getting away with claiming that Assange hacked. I think I explained why that is definitely an overstatement, and why the indictment from the Trump administration of Julian Assange is very, very weak. I don't know. Do you think I should make an edited, produced video this week about the bogusness of the Julian Assange indictment? Do some legal analysis. You can let me know what you think about that down in the comment section. Now that I've come to my 6th anniversary, I definitely want to recommit to doing some more edited, produced videos. The Turn the Supreme Court Up to 11 video is coming along nicely. There's another video I've been promising about social norms and how yelling Norm at Cheers is a social norm that might be coming up. You can let me know whether you want to see those videos coming up sometime in the near future. I also, hold on one second here. I was looking at the live comments along the way, and I noticed that I have gotten some super chat contributions at the beginning of the show. I want to thank those people here. That's always nice to see, and I wanted to remind you one more time, if you give me a PayPal contribution at the link down in the video description of just $6 before April 20th, instead of a $10 contribution, for just $6 you can get this ACLU Constitution and this hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker, if you give me a shipping address to send it to. And that's just about it for the program. I did promise a bonus Dash and Sandy clip. This is Dash and Sandy at the water bowl and feeding bowl, both for breakfast and dinner. I edited them both together. You'll hear some Dash and Sandy noises. What more can I give you than 30 seconds of Dash and Sandy over here? Sandy. And that's the bonus Dash and Sandy clip. I hope you appreciate all the clips I picked out for you, that I've spent 8 to 10 hours this Sunday picking out the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows, the political comedy clips, and not just this Sunday, but every Sunday for the last 6 years, going all the way back to April 14th, 2013, and the very first Liberal Sunday live clip roundup. This is one of a continuing series. I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday for the foreseeable future. I may have an edited, produced video on the bogusness of the Julian Assange indictment, especially if you tell me down in the comment section that's something you want to see. And until I have time to upload that edited, produced video or one of these other edited, produced videos, I guess I will be seeing all of you around, and I will be back next Sunday, like I said, and until then I will be seeing all of you around the internet.